This video talks about war and conflict and other things that scare YouTube advertisers, which means it's probably going to get demonetized. So if you like this kind of work and want to support me, you can check out my Patreon, or if you really want to go the extra mile, you can buy my book, Century of Song. Links in the description.
Come, you masters of war.
The year was 1963, and America was at war. It was at war with the Soviet Union, an ideological Cold War for global supremacy that had come perilously close to turning hot just 1 year earlier.
That a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
It was at war with Vietnam, a proxy war that had been slowly escalating under the oversight of John F. Kennedy. And it was at war with itself, as Black Americans across the country fought for their long-promised civil rights, and were met with violent terror. These three conflicts would come to loom over a bloody and tumultuous decade, destined to reshape American culture and politics forever. Before the 60s were out, there would be riots in the streets, a slew of political assassinations, and a culture of mass protest that spanned from sea to shining sea. In 1963, much of the anti-war movement was centralized around a single neighborhood in New York City. There, a young songwriter named Bob Dylan was recording a scathing indictment of the warmongers wrapping their bloody fingers around his country's neck.
Come, you masters of war. You that build the big guns. You that build the death planes. You that build all the bombs.
Dylan had other songs in 1963 that galvanized the protest movement. Blowin' in the Wind became a civil rights anthem, and A Hard Rain's a Gonna Fall captured the looming sense of dread lingering over a generation of Cold War youth. But Masters of War tapped into something darker, more primal.
You that never done nothing but build to destroy. You play with my world like it's your little toy.
It's a song so direct and simple that it's almost apolitical. Dylan isn't singing about any of the specific wars looming over America or the rest of the world in the 1960s. He's singing about the military-industrial complex, a growing engine that will cause the decades of war to come.
You fasten all the triggers for the others to fire. And then you sit back and watch when the death count gets higher.
He shows neither patience nor sympathy for those behind this cold machine.
And I hope that you die, and your death will come soon. I follow your casket by the pale afternoon.
Masters of War is a study in emotion and atmosphere that I have to imagine resonated deeply with a generation raised under fear of nuclear apocalypse. I've been thinking about Masters of War and about the whole Greenwich Village folk scene a lot lately. It's a scene that's rightfully celebrated for standing against unjust wars and standing for civil rights. But ultimately, I think these musical peace movements kind of failed in their goals. The passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 was an enormous win, but it was met with a vicious backlash that ripples out to this day. The peace movement definitely played a role in ending the Vietnam War, but not before a decade more fighting and more than 1 million unnecessary deaths. And while the Cold War never did end up going hot, no amount of protest could bridge the gap between Soviet and American society. Even so, I think there's a deep value to songs like Masters of War, a value that runs beyond protest. These folk songs stand as historical documents, not just commenting on the events of a given moment, but capturing the emotional sensation of being alive in that moment. That's something that many in the Greenwich Village scene understood about their music. They understood that folk music is not just about the now. It's about the past and about the future, about creating a deep emotional lineage that can be tapped by anyone as we try to navigate the complexities of the human condition. And unfortunately, war is a constant feature of the human condition. So today, I want to look at how the Greenwich Village folk singers portrayed war, how they used music and lyrics not just to depict their own times, but to tell stories of wars past, and to warn of the wars to come. This video isn't going to be a comprehensive history on these songs or this scene. Instead, I want you to think of it as a mixtape, a collection of curated songs and stories that meditate on a theme, fit into a very specific emotional space, and are tied to a distinct historical moment. I'm calling this mixtape The War Songs of Greenwich Village. Long before the era-defining wars of the 1960s, America was lit ablaze by internal struggles in the 1930s. As the Great Depression shattered the economy, working-class Americans began to unionize en masse, banding together to fight for better wages and safer working conditions. They were met with dismissal, harassment, and often outright violence. Such was the case in Harlan County, Kentucky, a coal mining county that fell into a bitter and bloody conflict that would come to be known as the Harlan County War. That war saw the United Mine Workers of America lead strikes across the county, only to be met by violence from the Sheriff J.H. Blair, who openly sided with the mine owners, viewing the striking workers as communist agitators. Blair deputized private guards who defended scabs and employed scare tactics on Union leaders. One of these leaders was Sam Reese, whose house was ransacked late one night while his wife Florence was alone with her children. Blair and his men waited in Reese's house the whole night, planning to shoot him if he returned. But Sam didn't come home that night. When Blair's men finally dispersed, Florence Reese tore a page from a calendar and channeled her rage at the incident into song, lifting the melody from a Baptist hymn called Lay the Lily Low. The result was one of the defining songs of this era of labor wars, Which Side Are You On? The song became an anthem for Harlan County and started to make the rounds in unions across the country. But in these times, the recording industry was young and commercial, and there was very little interest in recording protest songs from unionists. As far as I can tell, Which Side Are You On wasn't recorded until a decade after it was written, when a man named Pete Seeger came upon it. Seeger was then a young New York musician and a card-carrying communist. He was a member of a folk group called the Almanac Singers, who recorded leftist songs as part of their open advocacy for leftist causes. Most of the songs that the Almanac Singers recorded were more upbeat, songs meant to knit communities together through laughter and lighthearted camaraderie. But Which Side Are You On strikes a different chord. Seeger and the Almanac Singers perform Reese's lyrics with a dark severity.
From all of you good workers, good news to you I'll tell, of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
Seeger's banjo sets the heavy tone, while the Almanac Singers belt the chorus as a choir, giving voice to the thousands of workers across the country, united in a shared struggle.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Reese's lyrics are specific to Harlan County, but the song itself transcends any individual struggle. It breaks the fight for workers' rights down into a divine battle laid across class lines. And the lyrics are simple and endlessly adaptable. After Seeger's recording, the song would spread further, its lyrics morphing to fit the myriad union fights being waged across the country in the middle century.
Don't scab for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. Us poor folks haven't got a chance unless we organize.
Which side are you on?
For his part in spreading this and other union songs, Seeger would soon find himself blacklisted under the dark tide of McCarthyism. This political persecution at the hands of his own ostensibly free government would put his career on hold for a decade and leave him in political limbo. But surely enough, in the late 50s, progressive folk music began to rise again in the streets of Greenwich Village. There, Seeger took up the role of elder statesman, helping to mentor a younger generation of folk singers who were themselves leading a new progressive movement as their generation came of age. The whole time, Which Side Are You On remained a staple of Seeger's repertoire, a dark reminder of the history of bloody Harlem to carry forward into a new era of discord and resistance. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, if you made your way to the corner of Hudson and West 11th, you'd find a pub teeming with artistic life. The White Horse Tavern is one of the oldest pubs in New York City and continues to operate to this day. Over the years, its regular patrons have included the likes of Dylan Thomas, Hunter Thompson, James Baldwin, and Jack Kerouac. And if you went into this tavern at the height of the folk revival, you might have been lucky enough to see 4 Irishmen in cable-knit sweaters belting sea shanties and songs of Irish rebellion.
Sligo and Leitrim too. We'll give them the slip and we'll take a sip of the real old Mountain Dew. Hey, diddly-day-dum, diddly-doo.
The Clancy Brothers were born in County Tipperary, a historic pastoral county that's played key roles throughout Ireland's history of rebellion and civil war. The oldest in the band, Paddy Clancy, was born during the Irish Civil War and came up in Ireland. He and younger brother Tom both served as members of the Irish Republican Army, then, strangely enough, went on to join the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. At war's end, the brothers emigrated to Canada, then bounced around the States doing odd jobs until they landed in New York City, finding work as actors and singers. There, they began to organize late-night folk concerts at the Cherry Lane Theatre and integrated themselves with the budding Greenwich scene. Their younger brother, Liam Clancy, and friend Tommy Macomb would eventually join them in New York. Together, the 4 singers made a name for themselves, stirring up an interest in traditional Irish music. They were a big influence on Bob Dylan and became staples of a vivid, culturally diverse scene. Many of their songs are bright and jovial, but the Clancy brothers had their own war songs too. Songs created not in protest of war, but in favor of rebellion. Songs like The Wind That Shakes the Barley.
I sat within the valley green, I sat me with my true love.
Tommy Macomb's performance of this heavy ballad is masterful. His deep baritone embodies the tragic sense of duty told in the song's lyrics.
My sad heart strove the two between the old love and the new love. The old for her, the new that made me think on Ireland dearly.
Macomb likely learned the song from his mother Sarah, who was herself a balladeer in Ireland. Its lyrics are set on the backdrop of the 1798 rebellion, a failed insurrection against the British Crown. It was written in 1861 by the Irish poet Robert Dwyer Joyce, and it was likely sung just a few years later during 1867's Fenian Rising, another failed attempt at rebellion.
While soft the wind blew down the glen and shook the golden barley.
The lyrics tell the story of a young man caught between two loves, his love for his woman and his love for his country.
But harder still to bear the shame of foreign chains around us.
The hero chooses to take up the call of rebellion, and his true love is shot down by a British soldier.
A bullet pierced my true love's side in life's young spring so early.
In the climax of the song, the hero gets his bloody revenge at the Battle of Ullart Hill, where a force of 5,000 rebels annihilated 100 British militiamen.
But blood for blood without remorse, I've taken at Ullart Hollow and laid my true love's clay-cold corpse where I full soon may follow.
There's a bitter hatred and vengeance in Makeham's delivery, a sharp acidity leaking through the mournful ballad. In the last haunting moments of the song, his voice quivers on the titular symbol, barley.
With breaking heart, whene'er I hear the wind that shakes the barley.
Irish rebels frequently carried barley with them to serve as provisions when marching across the moors. When these rebels were massacred and thrown into mass graves, that barley would take seed, growing into monuments for the fallen. This barley became an important symbol for Ireland's national movements and a sign of the resilience of the Irish spirit, rising from ash to fight for independence, time and time again. Of the many rebel songs sung in Greenwich Village and beyond, one of the most striking and most celebrated is the Foggy Dew. Written by a priest named Charles O'Neill, the song recounts the Easter Rising of 1916. It was part of the Clancy Brothers repertoire and has seen recordings by all sorts of Irish acts like the Dubliners, the Wolf Tones, the Chieftains, and even Sinead O'Connor. But I've always been fascinated by another version, one performed by a woman without a drop of Irish blood in her. Odetta never lived in Greenwich Village, but she made plenty of appearances at its clubs and coffee houses, and left enormous marks on its community. She's one of those singers you might call your favorite singer's favorite singer. She's also one of those singers you might call your favorite activist's favorite singer. She was a stated influence on Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, Harry Belafonte, Carly Simon, and more. Rosa Parks was also an enormous fan, and no less than Martin Luther King Jr. called her the Queen of American folk music. She was also known by some as the voice of the civil rights movement. And that voice was a powerful one.
On this mountain.
Odetta trained as an opera singer in her youth, performed in musical theater, and then found her way to folk music. She was a true student of folk, pouring through archives and songbooks to find music that could resonate with her moment and speak to the civil rights struggle. She sang Negro spirituals, country and blues songs, and in one instance, an Irish rebel song. Odetta's full, deep voice is a perfect vehicle for the high drama of the Foggy Dew.
Oh, down the glen I went one morn to a city there rode I.
The song is set in the dying moments of the Easter Rising, an insurrection led by Irish Republicans that was centered around Dublin.
Right proudly high over Dublin town they hung out the flag of war.
The singer arrives to Dublin just in time to watch British reinforcements retake the city.
For Britannia's sons with their long-range guns sailed in through the foggy dew.
Odetta makes a few lyrical changes, and perhaps a few lyrical mistakes in her version. The more traditional arrangement sings not of Britannia's sons, but of Britannia's Huns, drawing direct comparison to the anti-German propaganda used by the British in the First World War. There's a lot of World War I subtext in the Foggy Dew, because World War I played a big part in the Easter Uprising and the Irish War of Independence that followed shortly thereafter. One verse of the song, omitted in Odetta's arrangement, speaks of Britain's hypocrisy in claiming that World War I was actually about liberating small nations. And a verse that Odetta changes a little states that it's better for a young Irishman to die in Ireland than to die for the British crown at Gallipoli. Now, some might say that Odetta's version is weaker for its omitted verses, for not fully capturing the proper cultural context, and I think that that's a valid criticism, but I don't agree with it. One of the reasons why I think Odetta's version is so wonderful is because it distills the Foggy Dew into a simpler, more archetypal song about the struggle for freedom, and in doing so, it speaks to Odetta's own audience, an audience who were themselves in the midst of a deadly fight for their own freedom.
The bravest fell, and the solemn bell rang mournfully and clear.
Odetta's performance of the Foggy Dew doesn't explicitly change the song to be about the civil rights movement, but it does call to mind the parallels between these two fights for freedom. Like so many Irish rebel songs, the Foggy Dew romanticizes those who battle against impossible odds to win the freedom for their own culture, for their own people. Even if the methods of the Irish rebels differed greatly from that of the civil rights movement, the spark of defiance, the thirst for freedom, was shared between both. And it's that spark that Odetta captures so perfectly in her rendition of the Foggy Dew.
The world did gaze with deep amaze at those fearless men but true, who bore the fight that freedom's light might shine through the foggy dew.
Nina Simone was not a folk singer. She certainly played folk songs, along with blues, gospel, and classical music, but to define her by any of these would be to miss the brilliance that is Nina Simone. She was an artist who truly defied definition, which is one of the many reasons why she was so beloved in Greenwich Village. In her early career, she was known for singing jazz and show tunes paired with a distinct singing voice and virtuosic piano playing. But in 1963, as her star was rising, the world around Simone drove her to make a career-defining pivot. On September 15th of that year, a group of Ku Klux Klan members bombed the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. The vicious attack injured many members of the congregation and killed 4 young girls. It was a painful reminder of just how far some were willing to go to prevent racial equality. And it set Nina Simone on the warpath. After hearing the news, a furious Simone sat down to write a song about it. In an hour of determined writing, she had composed her first civil rights song.
The name of this tune is Mississippi Goddam.
Mississippi Goddam was first recorded in March 1964, when she performed it in the prestigious Carnegie Hall in front of a predominantly white audience. She introduces the song as a show tune for a show that hasn't been written, and in its opening notes, the song does feel like a dark and sardonic twist on a show tune. Simone vents her frustrations with the segregationist South over jaunty piano music.
Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi Goddam.
But it's not long before the song shifts into darker territory. Simone describes in chilling detail the dystopian reality of being black in America.
Hound dogs on my trail, school children sitting in jail, black cat cross my path. I think every day's gonna be my last.
She speaks with the voice of all her people, who are tired of calls for incremental change, all while churches are being bombed and peaceful protesters are being brutalized.
Don't tell me, I'll tell you. me and my people just about do. I've been there, so I know. You keep on saying, go slow.
In the Carnegie Hall recording, you can hear her rage simmering beneath the surface of her wry ad-libs.
I bet you thought I was kidding, didn't you?
In a later performance, recorded after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., Simone makes it abundantly clear that this is a war song.
The king is dead. The king of love is dead. I ain't about to be nonviolent, honey. Oh, no.
Toward the end of the song, in one of the darkest moments, Simone offers a bleak proclamation of what she thinks of America.
Oh, but this whole country is full of lies. You all gonna die and die like flies. I don't trust you anymore. You keep on saying, go slow.
Nina Simone's raw honesty was met with censorship and controversy. Mississippi Goddam was banned across much of the South, and some radio stations even took to destroying their copies. Simone was put under FBI surveillance for daring to sing in favor of civil rights, and all of this only served to galvanize her further. She sang Mississippi Goddam during the Selma to Montgomery March and expanded her repertoire to fit more civil rights songs, becoming one of the most distinct and fiery voices of the entire movement. In the summer of 1950, a teenage Leonard Cohen made a friend at summer camp. That friend was the son of union organizers and introduced Cohen to a book called The People's Songbook. Edited by Waldemar Hill, a friend of Pete Seeger's, and compiled with the help of Seeger himself, as well as folk singers and scholars like Woody Guthrie and Alan Lomax, The People's Songbook was a collection of political songs from across America and the rest of the world, and it enthralled the young Cohen. He and his friend would sing songs from it every morning, steeping themselves in a rich history of folk resistance. One song that left a particular mark on Cohen was called Song of the French Partisan. The music for that was originally written by Anna Marley, a Russian refugee who emigrated to France shortly after the Red Terror. A teenage Marley found work as a ballet dancer and a cabaret singer before the Nazis invaded. When France fell, she fled for London and made contact with the French resistance, including Emmanuel Dastier de la Vigerie, who wrote the lyrics for The Partisan. Marley would perform the song on the BBC's French service, inspiring the freedom fighters across the channel as they risked their life to resist Nazi occupation. In 1944, a Tin Pan Alley lyricist named Hy Zerrett adapted the song into English. It's that Zerrett adaptation that became the basis for Cohen's version.
When they poured across the border, I was cautioned to surrender. This I could not do.
Cohen recorded his song in October of 1968, a year that saw America and much of the world consumed by political tension and violence. On that backdrop, The Partisan serves as a unique and subtle piece of political commentary. Its brooding music and desperate lyrics paint vivid pictures of tension, fear, and the constant need for subterfuge.
I have changed my name so often. I've lost my wife and children, but I've many friends.
Cohen also depicts the casual ruthlessness of the Nazis trying to root out the resistance.
An old woman gave us shelter, kept us hidden in the garret. Then the soldiers came. She died without a whisper.
Notably, Cohen's version changes this verse to be more broad than Marley's. The original specifically mentions Germans, while Cohen leaves his partisans' enemies unnamed. In doing so, he may be subtly questioning the imperialistic powers of his age, the Soviet Union, and America. The partisans' fight for liberation calls to mind the Prague Spring of earlier that year, and also shares parallels with the Viet Cong. The guerrilla tactics described in the song bear a lot of resemblance to those used by the Viet Cong trying to repel an invading American force.
There were 3 of us this morning. I'm the only one this evening, but I must go on. The frontiers are my prison.
I don't know if this is what Cohen intended with his song, but it's certainly a reading that's easy to come to when you take into account the historical moment in which Cohen chose to record it. Originally, Cohen's version featured just himself and a bass, but he felt there was an authenticity lacking in it. Even if he was recontextualizing it into his time, Cohen wanted a piece of the original song in there. So he flew to Paris, where he recorded a trio of French singers and an accordion, calling back to the song's origins.
Les amants étaient chez moi, ils me disent signe-toi, mais je n'ai pas peur.
The verses sung in French stick to the original words, specifically mentioning France and the Germans.
J'ai changé 100 fois de nom, j'ai perdu femme et enfant, mais j'ai tant d'amis. J'ai la France entière.
The final verse of The Partisan is taken from Hai Zeret's translation, a translation that makes a big shift from the original. Both versions finish on the promise of freedom, but when the song was sung by Marley, she sang that when freedom returned, the partisans would be forgotten and would return to the shadows. In Zeret and Cohen's version, freedom sees the partisans emerge from the shadows.
Oh, the wind is blowing. Through the graves the wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come. Then we'll come from the shadows.
In some ways, it's a more optimistic vision for the song. The original envisions the resistance less as heroes and more as desperate people doing what they must under dire circumstances. And frequently, that meant doing things that no one would want to do in a peaceful society. For me, sinking back into the shadows is a representation of that lingering, haunted reality. Coming from the shadows, on the other hand, is a sort of catharsis, an absolution for any sins committed in the name of freedom, and the promise of a hero's welcome. It eschews the complicated morality of the original for something more mythic, a cosmic struggle between oppressed and oppressor. In doing so, Cohen's version of The Partisan broadens the song, making it a document not just of the time it was written, nor of the time it was recorded, but of the great and eternal human struggle for freedom. Dave Van Ronk was not shy about his politics. He was a member of anarchist and socialist organizations, an overt supporter of a number of leftist causes, and he was even arrested at the Stonewall riots. As the story goes, Van Ronk was nearby, saw people brawling with the cops, and jumped at the opportunity to join the fray. But unlike a lot of his Greenwich Village contemporaries, Van Ronk's politics didn't actually appear much in his music. He gravitated more towards singing old blues and folk songs, songs built on raw expressions of human emotion. His sincere, raspy voice and deep knowledge of folk music made him a giant in the Greenwich scene, and he influenced many of the greats who came through. But in 1971, he took a rare turn from playing traditionals and wrote his own song for fellow folkman Patrick Skye.
When I came back from Luang Prabang, I didn't have a thing where my balls used to hang, but I got a wooden medal and a fine harangue, and now I'm a fucking hero.
Luang Prabang takes its melody from a traditional English coal mining song called Biker Hill. Van Ronk's lyrics echo the original song's light-hearted irreverence, but change it to be a jab at the Vietnam War.
Mourn your dead, land of the free. If you wanna be a hero, follow me. Mourn your dead, land of the free. If you wanna be a hero, follow me.
Skye first recorded the song in 1971, and Van Ronk was known to perform it alongside him, but it wouldn't be until 1985 that Van Ronk would record the song for himself. He sings from the perspective of a soldier who lost his testicles fighting in the Vietnam War.
And now the boys all envy me. I fought for Christian democracy with nothing but air where my balls used to be. Now I'm a fucking hero.
His lyrics question the narratives about patriotism and heroism, narratives that the realities of the Vietnam War had already thrown into harsh light for many. By the time Van Ronk wrote the song in 1971, American withdrawal was already on the horizon, but the war had cost countless lives, not only in Vietnam, but in the destabilized regions around it. The province of Luang Prabang, or as it's more properly pronounced, Luang Prabang, isn't in Vietnam at all, but rather in Laos. It was the site of a battle in the spring of 1971, in which the Royal Laotian Army, backed by the CIA, defended attacks on the royal capital by the Viet Cong. As far as battles in Vietnam go, it's an interesting choice for Van Ronk to highlight, but I don't really think the details of the battle are that relevant to the song. Instead, it serves as a convenient rhyme for Van Ronk, allowing him to sing out his gallows humor about the war. And while the song is short and simple, it packs a powerful punch, particularly in the final verse.
In Luang Prabang there is a spot where the corpses of your brothers rot, and every corpse is a patriot, every corpse is a hero.
For me, this is some of the most impactful writing of the entire anti-war movement, even if the song itself is kind of obscure. In Luang Prabang, Dave Van Ronk has no room for excuses or counterfactuals. He depicts the reality of the Vietnam War for the bleak truth of what it left behind. A pile of corpses.
Mourn your dead, land of the free. If you want to be a hero, follow me. Mourn your dead, land of the free. If you want to be a hero, follow me.
I don't think there's any singular grand truth to be found by examining all these songs, or by comparing their sometimes contrasting messages. I just think it's a scene worth celebrating, because of its lasting cultural impact, and because of the way it documented and recontextualized human history. And even if these war songs can't change anything, I think they're helpful tools and important artistic objects to reflect on as we struggle to understand our own age of endless wars. If you enjoy these kinds of stories about the ways that music intersects with politics and history, you'll probably enjoy my book, Century of Song. Century of Song is a history of American popular music as told through 101 songs. I pick one song to represent what was happening aesthetically, culturally, and historically each year from 1923 to 2023. And these stories are paired with original collage pieces created by myself. I personally think it's pretty cool, and I'm still really proud of it. If you like what I do on my channel, you'll enjoy it, and if you've got a music lover in your life, it makes a great gift for them. You can buy it wherever books are sold, and there's various links in the description. And hey, thanks for watching.